Give everyone a chance to get logged in here. Thanks for joining us. All right. All right, well, welcome everybody, and welcome to part 2 of our 2-part webinar covering street outreach in Clark County. My name is Laura Ellsworth, and I'm the Strategic Partnerships and Advocacy Manager for Council for the Homeless, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. For those of you who attended the first webinar on this topic back in August, you'll recall that we heard from people who have experienced homelessness and what it was like for them to be on the receiving end of street outreach. We learned how those efforts helped them move from homelessness to housed and what the experience was like for them. And for this webinar, we really wanted to focus more on what exactly is being done and by who in our community. And first, just a bit of housekeeping as we get started, like always. The only people that you can see and hear are hosts and panelists, so relax, you're not on camera. We will send out a recording of this webinar and post it to our website within the next week. You can see our website there at the bottom of this slide. And please do help us with providing your feedback after the webinar by taking the short survey that will appear in your browser. We really do appreciate the feedback, especially about what you'd like to know more about, and it really does help us plan future webinars. So tonight, I'll start with the who, the what, and the how of street outreach. We'll cover the effective components of it, talk about some different scenarios and when it's a good idea to call for street outreach workers if you see someone experiencing homelessness. And then we'll hear from an amazing panel of service providers who do this work. And as always, we'll end our time together with a call to action. Thanks for being here. So I wanted to share just a quick review from our first webinar, just to refresh everyone's memory. Street outreach is engagement and trust building. It takes an average of 17 positive interactions to successfully connect a person to housing. Street outreach provides supplies to meet basic needs. There are several wonderful grassroots groups that provide meals and supplies on a weekly basis to folks who are living outside. Groups like Just One Thing and Battleground, who give out kits of supplies that include bottled water, snacks, dry socks, and hats and gloves to folks, and many others who see a need in our community and who step up to provide food, clothing, hygiene, and comfort to people. Street outreach is also about connections to services like mailboxes through Outsiders Inn, or showers or laundry through Food with Friends. It's also crisis response, and this is done by trained professionals when a person is in a mental health crisis to help calm and de-escalate a situation. It's also harm reduction, an evidence-based practice that is intended to reduce the amount of harm caused by engaging in risky behavior. It's reducing housing barriers. And I want to point out that barriers are often caused by policy and not by people themselves, and are wide-ranging, and the key to reducing them is to work with each individual person to meet their specific needs. And finally, housing assessments. This is a tool used in the homeless crisis response system to determine what specific needs a person might have and how to help them as a unique individual obtain stable housing. And as you hear from our panel tonight, I want you to be on the lookout for how each of these components fit into their work. So we have a variety of outreach teams in Clark County, and here are just some of the agencies, many of the agencies that provide this service. And we're lucky enough to be hearing from folks from these agencies tonight. So when we think about street outreach, we know that there are certain evidence-based proven practices. You heard in our first webinar about using a person-centered approach, which is supporting the person to be involved in making decisions about their life and takes into account each person's life experience, age, gender, culture, heritage, language, beliefs, and identity. And being trauma-informed understands and considers the pervasive nature of trauma and promotes environments of healing and recovery rather than practices and services that may inadvertently re-traumatize. It's walking alongside people versus fixing people. That's a core component of street outreach, and you're going to hear more about that from our panel tonight. But if I could channel Ted Lasso here, walking alongside people is about believing in people and being curious and not judgmental about their life experiences, and supporting them as they navigate their own way out of homelessness rather than fixing it for them. Harm reduction is a practice that incorporates a spectrum of strategies, including safer techniques, managed use, and abstinence to promote the dignity and well-being of people who use drugs or engage in behaviors that can cause self-harm. It's a framework for understanding structural inequities like poverty, racism, homophobia, classism, and more. And it's really meeting people where they are and not leaving them there. So you may be wondering if it's okay to call street outreach teams, or what are the circumstances that warrant a call to street outreach teams versus when should you call a crisis response team? And the bottom line is that our outreach workers want to help. They want to know where people are and reach out to those, to begin those 17 positive interactions with folks in order to get them connected to services and housing. And it's important to know that, you know, when or who to call and when someone is in need of connection versus when someone is in crisis. So our panelists tonight will talk more about this. And I also do want to acknowledge that it's hard to see someone in need who may be suffering publicly from a mental health issue or an addiction issue. It's good to know that there are professionals in our community who are equipped to handle this situation. So here are some phone numbers. You know, hours and response time will vary, but staff does appreciate knowing where people are so that they can reach out. And it's important to know that staff are not available 24/7. So now I'd like to introduce our incredible panel tonight. Adam Kravitz is a person with lived experience with homelessness, the criminal justice system, mental health, and addiction. With understanding and expertise around homelessness and recovery, Adam founded the nonprofit Outsiders In to both advocate for the homeless community's needs and to provide best practice services for unhoused residents of Vancouver. He's been a certified peer for more than 7.5 years now, as well as a recovery coach and a trainer. He has a broad expertise through his work in numerous programs, including drop-in centers and the Warm Line. He's currently on the mobile crisis team and police co-responder teams. Adam was vice chair of the Clark County Community Action Advisory Board, sits on the Peer Advancement Coalition, and is a member of United Peers of Washington. Adam specializes in recovery, peer support model of meeting people where they are at and helping them identify and work towards achieving their goals. Mike DeLay is the program manager for Columbia River Mental Health Services Substance Use Disorder Department, serving a wide array of clients that include many houseless members of our community. He has 10 years of community service provision in the Clark County area. Mike has experience working in outreach, housing, substance use services for incarcerated individuals, and program development with an eye towards including the needs of people who are homeless. Lance Gayton has been with Seymour CSNW for 7 months, but has worked in outreach for many years, serving the community and working with individuals who need support in recovery and housing. Lance leads by example and works day in and day out to make sure his clients get the best wraparound care possible. Cody Shaw has worked in the recovery and housing field for the last 8 years. Coming from a background of lived experience, he knows the importance of listening to each person's story to identify a person-centered and trauma-informed approach to direct service. As the coordinated outreach manager at Council for the Homeless, he is working to streamline process, increase engagement, and create a coordinated, collaborative, and innovative outreach effort across the entire homeless crisis response system. Jackie Snell has a BSW in social work and has been working for SHARE, providing services for people who are unhoused for 4.5 years. She started off as a case manager at SHARE's day center, or day shelter, which then moved to the larger navigation center. When SHARE stopped operating the navigation center in February of 2020, she moved to the outreach team. Jackie has 2 wonderful children, a 15-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl, and a 6-month-old black lab puppy, 2 quirky cats, and loves sports, and they all keep her very busy. All right, so let's get to our panel discussion tonight. Thank you, everybody. We have quite a variety of experts here to talk about their work. So let's start with you, Jackie. Can you talk about the role of your agency and your specific role within street outreach and crisis response work within the homeless crisis response system?
Absolutely. We have men's shelters, women's shelters, and then we also operate the winter shelter, the WHO that we does couples and children, and just single women. So it's just a more variety. And then we also have housing programs. We do hot meals, but the backpack program that provides lunches for kids at schools that aren't able to afford lunches. So all kinds of different stuff. But the program that I am on is our street outreach team. We recently moved from having 2 staff on our outreach team to now we will be up to 12. We're not quite there yet. And then we're also operating 7 days a week, and in the evenings. So that's been really awesome because we're able to connect with more people, get so much more done, providing, like, building rapport. We're just able to connect with a larger community of the growing homeless crisis.
Wonderful, thank you. Mike, how about you? Can you talk about the role of your agency specifically and your work within that for street outreach and crisis response?
Sure. So we at Columbia River have a variety of housing programs that are attached to Council for the Homeless, but this is our first kind of foray into homeless outreach services with our street mobile teams. So we're in the process of launching a street-based behavioral health team, as well as overnight crisis. So we're putting together a mobile unit that'll encompass basic medical services. So there'll be a nurse on the team. We'll have a mental health professional, a substance use disorder professional, a peer, and a part-time prescriber that will actually be traveling around to different locations where unhoused individuals congregate to provide better access to supportive services and kind of operate in a pre-crisis role, help them connect to supportive services before they reach the point where they need to engage higher levels or higher systems of care. And then later on in winter, we will be rolling out overnight crisis teams to kind of support what's already happening in our community and cover that 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. gap. And that'll again encompass mental health professional, substance use disorder professional, and a peer. So we're really trying to bring some additional resources to the unhoused community. There's some fantastic outreach programs that are currently operating, and we're really looking to supplement what's already going on and bring in some additional resources to support the work that's currently happening.
That's great. Very exciting to hear about the extended hours as well. Yeah. Adam, how about you?
Okay. Hi, my name is Adam Kravitz, Executive Director of Outsiders In. We're the newest agency, I'd say, in the community, and our role in the system has expanded quite rapidly. We currently have a 27 men shelter at St. Paul's Church downtown. We operate mail service 6 times a week for anybody in Clark County that needs an address. We have our newest outreach program, which I'll circle back to. And then we also do a wintertime satellite shelter that lives in 3 different churches and rotates throughout the week to make a 7-day-a-week shelter. And that will be for women, couples. I think we said pets this year. So we're going to be able to take those harder to hit populations and at least get 15 more people off the streets during the winter. And then there is new programs coming on the way. But as far as for tonight, the street outreach program, we have a 2-person team, 7 days a week that right now is from 12 to 7. I think eventually we'd like to go 12 to 8. But we are evenings and weekends. And the specialty part about our team is that we are all peers, all people with lived experience with homelessness, with addiction, with criminal justice system, and with mental health. Most of us, if not the majority of us, have experience of actual homelessness here in Vancouver. So when we are going to visit people, there are times when we've been in that exact same location, not just metaphorically, but actually. And it really makes a difference when we can bridge that gap rather quickly and get past the superficial stuff and get on to the really important stuff of addressing what's going on with an individual at that time. Yeah, I think that's good. We'll circle back.
Okay, thank you, Adam. That's yeah, that's really incredible that all of your staff is has lived experience. I imagine that goes a long way in maybe reducing those 17 interactions that are needed. Yeah. Cody, how about you?
Sure. So my name is Cody Shaw. I'm the housing or coordinated outreach manager for Council for the Homeless. So with Council, we are what we call the coordinated entry point. So with coordinated entry, we're the one-stop shop for pretty much the majority of the services here in Clark County. So starting with the housing hotline, individual calls in, and that's the point where they would get potentially referred into shelter or just start accessing from there. As well as getting into what we call housing assessment, which is where we assess their vulnerability and begin to understand what the barriers are and start working towards achieving those barriers. Individual can be placed into a couple different pools and go from there. So our outreach team, so right now we are, the outreach team is me, but we are also currently hiring for 3 other outreach individuals, and we're super excited to have a brand new outreach director that starts November 1st. So we're really gearing up. Our outreach teams are specifically focused more towards housing assessment and placement. So they will work doing housing assessment as well as working with the other housing coordinators to get documentation of those things needed for actual placement into program, as well as helping to reduce some of those barriers. Part of my job is also administration when it comes to the Motel voucher program, which is brand new for us, which allows the outreach workers to refer an individual who's a little highly vulnerable or somebody under their discretion that they may need to locate a little bit quicker, place them into a hotel overnight to easily access that individual or to help them kind of navigate a specific barrier, and then go from there, as well as our flex funding for the county, which allows us to navigate other significant barriers like back rent, back utilities, move-in costs, to help individuals who are unsheltered or experiencing homelessness navigate those barriers earlier and potentially get to a place where they can self-resolve rather than waiting the extensive length of times that it can potentially take to get placed into program.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think Cody, your role in what Council for the Homeless is doing is it's a good example of that housing assessment and placement piece, which is kind of across that spectrum of what street outreach is, ranging from meeting basic needs to, that assessment at the other end. So thank you for sharing about that. All right, Lance, how about you? What does your agency do and what's your role within that agency?
Hi, my name is Lance Gate and I work for CMAR Community Services Northwest. So CMAR provides a range of different things from tents and sleeping bags, scheduling medical appointments, going out and doing cleanups closely with the HEART team. Mine specifically, I'm up here for the Pathfinder team, and we have 4 other homeless outreach programs. I think we have a total of 10 outreach workers. We have the Pathfinder program, we have the Forensic Path program, we have the Path program, and just recently we got a contract for one of the 2 Path peer outreach workers. Their job, one of them will be specifically to mitigate crisis between the crisis response team and law enforcement to see if it is a crisis, and how they can navigate for the individual that's needing services. And then we have the SOAR program, the Social Security Outreach Recovery Access Program.
That's great. Yeah. And for those of you not familiar with the world of social work, there are lots of acronyms. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. So we talked a little bit in our introduction about sort of, best practices, proven key components of street outreach. Could you address some of those and how they apply to your work? Some of those concepts and buzzwords, if you will, like being trauma informed and person centered and harm reduction. If anyone wants to just jump in, if that really resonates with the work that you do, feel free and just talk about how you implement some of that in the work that you do.
So I'll go ahead and jump in. With Share Outreach, we also provide harm reduction services with our mobile syringe exchange. And what we do with that is really, we are very trauma informed, very person-centered. Also, when it comes to those things, it all kind of goes together. And what we are really trying to do is reduce harm within the unhoused community and the population specifically that injects drugs. So we're providing clean syringes, which leads to less hospital visits because less abscess, less transmissible diseases through sharing needles and using dirty needles. And then we also provide education around injecting drugs and the safest way to use. We also provide Narcan, which is to reduce opioid overdoses. And then we also provide fentanyl test strip kits that people can use to test to see if their drugs are cut with fentanyl, which is like a synthetic opioid, and a very small amount can put you into overdose very quickly. So that's, I think, Share's biggest role in those things. And as far as just general outreach, I really think that being person-centered and really having the person lead their way to housing, ultimately, everyone that we speak with, they know what's best for themselves. They know what's going to work for them, and we want to respect that.
Awesome. Thank you. Cody.
So I'm learning how to raise my hand. So I think for us really, and I think for most of, I may be able to speak for a majority of outreach, the idea of being person-centered and trauma-informed is understanding the individual story. So knowing where each person comes from. There's a lot of stigma and a lot of thoughts that are placed onto individuals based on others' perceptions of the person. And so really part of outreach is actually having those conversations and listening to them, where they come from, what happened to them, not what's wrong with them, but what happened to them in order for them to get to the space that they're currently in. That also allows that person to feel heard and understand. That also allows us to understand the trauma components that may have come into play, as well as help us navigate what the actual barriers are. Because just because an individual is homeless doesn't necessarily mean that they have a substance use issue. They could be just have a lower income, or stuck on, or have a set income that doesn't allow them to navigate things. There may be some mental health challenges there that they want to work through but haven't been able to get connected to the appropriate services, so on and so forth. So really focusing on the individual and their specific story to help them and help us navigate the specific barriers that they're going through, rather than using a one catch-all cookie cutter approach.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Adam, how about you?
The approach that we take, and I remind people all the time, is that every single person that we see in every one of our programs is practically in the middle of a traumatic situation right now. It's not enough to say that they're a trauma survivor or they're making it or anything else. They're in the middle of a trauma. It would be the example of seeing someone immediately after a car accident and but we don't talk to them like, are you okay? Like, what can I do to help you? Let's sit down here and talk. We do as street outreach people, all of us do. But generally, as normally the public looks at that and they're like, oh, there must be something wrong with that person, when we don't realize they are in a traumatic situation constantly and pervasively. And when we look at trauma, we do it in a way that is very like, again, towards what Cody said and what Jackie said. We really want the individual to drive what their idea of safety is. And so if someone needs an open space to sit and talk, or if someone needs a closed space and that door closed, we need to have that relationship and we need to ask those questions, and we do. And then we find that that does add to that 17 engagements to build that relationship, because then people know that we really care about what they need and want, even in that moment and through their situation.
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Lance?
Yeah, along with what everyone else has already said, now I know what's worked for me so far in the short time that I've been doing this is gaining that trust and having an open line of communication, and just being understanding and being mindful that, like, it could be the worst day ever. Everything they're experiencing, you know, is above like the general population's comprehension of what could be going on. And just listening, not trying to think about what I'm going to say as a response to them, just letting them talk and letting them share what they're comfortable sharing in that moment. And I noticed, like, something that's also been very helpful that I've always done is in like those 17 engagements that they talk about is just remembering something personal about that individual, about their circumstance, about the family member, about where they're from, about where they're going. And then every time I have another engagement, it's like we can compound on that conversation from before. And it just seems to, then we have true relation and building that trustworthiness, and that they feel safe with me and the other outreach workers that are represented by our agency seems to go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's see. Mike.
So when I think about kind of best practices and what we're looking to achieve with this, I hear the other members of the panel talking about things that are very, I think, foundational to effective outreach work. And I reflect back on something I was doing on a regular basis, right? But as we move forward, really being focused on a trauma-informed system of care, as well as being person-centered. It's about coming to people with options, not saying, hey, I see you in this situation, allow me to tell you what's going to be best for you. It's showing up, being present with an individual, literally where they're at, and saying, I care enough to be here. I'm part of a system that cares enough to have allowed me to come out here. Here's what we can do, right? These are the things that we're really effective at. These are the options that we have available. What do you think would work for your situation? Allowing them not only to be the expert on their situation, but really have that individually directed access to services, right? So providing them with the liberty of choice that so often is has been removed for folks in these situations, right? They have different systems telling them what they can and can't do. Maybe it's legal obligations preventing them from being around certain people or going certain places. They have a populace at large that isn't necessarily sensitive to their current situation and now making them feel welcome in certain environments, right? So they don't have the liberty of choice in a lot of environments. And being part of an organization or being part of a team that really reinforces the freedom of choice that they do have, I think is incredibly important. And I think it respects the person that you're working with, and also respects the experience that they're having, kind of like what Adam's talking about. They're in the middle of crisis, right? The crisis ebbs and flows, the trauma ebbs and flows, but it's never not a traumatic environment or a traumatic experience, and being sensitive to that and reaffirming that they have the freedom to make choices and that those choices are supportive, I think goes a long way towards making them feel valued as a human and as a neighbor in our community. The other piece that I think is really important with what we're trying to do as part of like the harm reduction model is it's again respecting individuals' right to choose, right? they're making different choices, and maybe those choices aren't to stop using, or maybe they're making choices that is not to engage in a pattern of behavior that's going to benefit their mental well-being, right? But still standing alongside that person and be like, okay, so this is the choice that you want to make. Here's all the information that we can provide you on what one choice might look like and another choice might look like. What would you like to do? And if they choose to, you know, hey, man, I'm not ready to stop using it. All right, cool. So where do we go from here? What else can I help you with? Or how can I be present in your experience so that if you do decide to make another choice, you know that that door is still open to you. You know, we work in a model at our agency, especially with our medication-assisted treatment program, where you know the cessation of use is not a requirement for continued engagement in services, right? And I think that has been a huge benefit to our population, right? Because they know they have a safe place to come to. They're not going to be judged. They're not going to be kicked out. They're not going to be shamed. They're not going to be shuffled off to another provider, right? And bringing that out into the community is so important because it's not something that people are used to, which is a shame. And I think that reflects poorly on the communities at large that haven't effectively connected with their homeless populations, because everybody has a right to make that choice. And making that choice shouldn't separate them from supportive services or the continued engagement in supportive services.
Yeah, thank you so much. The liberty of choice. That's very poignant. I've also heard it put, you know, the choices you make are the choices that you have. And I think, you know, people who find themselves experiencing homelessness probably haven't had a lot of choice in the road that got them there in general. Yeah.
Just to jump back into that, it's also about they're not reminded often enough that they still have choice. There's so many people telling them what they can't do, or that they don't have choice. Having somebody walk alongside them and be like, no, you really do have this option. You do have the power to make these choices. And that in and of itself, I think, can be empowering a lot of times for folks that haven't been hearing those words often enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in and add anything, or should I move on? All right. I see a lot of nodding heads. So, all right. So this is a $1 million question. Let's talk about the difference between crisis response and street outreach, and why is it important for the public to understand that those things are different? You know, and maybe touching more on, I mean, you've done a really good job so far, but of just that concept of like walking alongside people to help them resolve their homelessness versus fixing someone's homelessness. So let's see, I'll start with Lance this time.
Hi, thank you. So the difference between crisis response and street outreach, I would have to say, responding to a crisis, I would possibly know that it would potentially to be an elevated situation, maybe a harder to deal with situation than just going into an encampment and handing out lunches and basic hygiene. I think that I would be thinking, you know, thinking the events before I go out there and how am I going to act? How can I be extremely trauma informed, you know, approach in my approach, mindfulness and, you know, using that active listening more and just being there for the person to try to potentially de-escalate whatever they may be going through. You know, just maybe possibly being someone there that can hear them, that they may have a better day when we part ways, you know, and be able to provide whatever it is that they need, you know, because a crisis, I think, the definition of a crisis could be many things. So, and versus street outreach, you know, I think doing the same, having the same skill sets and the same tools in my bag to go to do street outreach. You know, I've gone to do street outreach, you know, the short time that I've been here for a cleanup and going into, you know, trying to be of service and walk alongside our persons that are going through a difficult time, seeing their belongings thrown away, things that mean everything to them. And that evolves into a major crisis So I don't know if I can really explain the difference other than for myself potentially knowing that I'm going into a more intense situation, but then also crises arise when everything is going well. So that's what I have.
And Adam, you mentioned, people experiencing homelessness or, experiencing trauma simultaneously. Would you also say that they're experiencing a crisis, or how would you, I know you were on the mobile crisis team, so how would you
So-
describe that?
Yes, I would say they're experiencing a crisis. Is that to the level of needing, mental health professionals and a more dedicated team because someone needs something, or is that person having a crisis because they're rightfully angry or righteously feeling a need to express themselves or traumatically expressing themselves? You know, in my opinion, crisis responses, for behavioral health issue that seems to be out of people's control, whether it's the person's control or the people around them's control. A lot of times, behavioral health crises are called in by other people and not the person themselves because people are witnessing a crisis. So maybe the question to ask is this crisis within myself because I'm witnessing something? Is this crisis because I'm witnessing an individual that is really experiencing pain and suffering or delusion or impairment of some sort that would require intervention? And so I think most of us, if we stop to think about it and take our heart out of the picture, we'll know that the difference between a real behavioral health crisis and a crisis of consciousness when people need our support and assistance, but also want to be talked to and listened to and guide what that assistance would be like.
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Mike? Your team will be doing some crisis response work as well. So what would you advise people is the difference between crisis response and street outreach?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of default to the language of my profession, and so I have a solid substance use background, hopefully solid. I view, and this is just me, right? So like I view interacting with individuals that are houselessness or experiencing homelessness, that's kind of like a long-term progressive condition, right? It doesn't start and stop at the same level, right? So the individual experiencing that is going to have a history of experiences that you're walking alongside them with, right? So when you're addressing some of their concerns or some of their presenting issues through outreach, you're with them in the moment as they're going through this long-term experience or this long-term condition, right? And I think that there's opportunities there to prevent their presenting situation from reaching a crisis level. A crisis situation is an acute moment in that person's experience, right? It's a very finite period of time or a very finite moment, right? As opposed to the longitudinal experience of homelessness. So when I think of somebody that would be appropriate for a crisis call out, right? That's somebody who's experiencing a mental health emergency or a substance use disorder specific emergency or an emergency of the spirit, right? So that's a moment. So a crisis call out for me is going to stand with somebody who is in that moment experiencing an overwhelming sense of something, and helping them walk through that moment so that they can connect to the necessary services or the necessary teams that are going to prevent them from getting back to that moment or having another moment, right? And hopefully engaging with them in such a fashion that they don't end up in a restrictive level of care, right? So that we don't have to have a DCR call out and they end up on involuntary treatment act or end up with law enforcement contact and all of the, the kind of attendant issues that come along with that, or end up in a hospitalization against their will, right? So it's an opportunity, it's a finite opportunity in that moment to help them navigate what they're experiencing without having them come in contact with restrictive care systems that are going to re-traumatize them potentially or add to the systemic levels of constraint that they face on a regular basis already, right? A crisis is an opportunity to engage with somebody and prevent their situation from becoming more complex and further reduce their liberties. So that's kind of how I look at it, if it makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. An emergency of the spirit. That's you guys are just full of gems tonight, I have to say. How about you, Jackie? Uh-oh, I think your connection might
You hit
be.
the.
Hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little slow. You might want to try turning off your camera. That might help. And if not, we can.
Can you hear me?
Go. Yep.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Go ahead. Yep.
So I think Mike hit the nail on the head, and that is that like they are in crisis for, you know, that longitudinal period. I would say when talking to the community, if somebody is questioning, should I call street outreach or should I call crisis? It's really about, is this person a harm to themselves or others? Street outreach, I'm pretty sure everybody is trained or has experience in crisis prevention, de-escalation, crisis intervention. And we are all able to provide those things. Like Lance said, we can go out and we're in an encampment and all of a sudden somebody's in crisis, and it literally could be one little thing that put them into that moment. They realize their phone was stolen, or they can't find their wallet, or everything's wet, whatever it is. And so in those moments, street outreach is able to provide intervention and just being there, actively listening, validating their feelings. You know, how can I help in the moment, whatever it is that they need. And ultimately, most times you'll find people will de-escalate. They will, you know, let you know what they need, and we're able to just prevent that escalation from going any further. So I would say, like, most crisis that the community would witness it could potentially be solved with an outreach worker going out and just communicating and helping them in that moment with whatever they need. But if you were to see somebody who you're like, they are actively using and they seem like they could be a threat to themselves or others, it would be more of a crisis call.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I often experience that in the work, doing this work, people will ask me in situations that come up. I live close to downtown Vancouver, and so sometimes there'll be people outside and people will, you know, consider somebody in crisis, and you know, when really it's exactly what some of you have touched on. It's not a real crisis of threat of harm to themselves or others. It's just, you know, a very heartbreaking and heart-wrenching thing to witness somebody, you know, experiencing symptoms in public, whatever it is that they're struggling with. So I think it is really helpful for the community to understand the difference between the two. And when, you know, that defaulting to calling street outreach workers is a good thing to do and a helpful thing to do. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next question. So I'd like to ask all of you, what is the most important thing in your point of view for the community to understand about the people you serve and the services that you provide? And Cody, I'll go ahead and start with you on that one.
Thanks, Laura. I think the most important thing that I would want the community to know first and foremost is everybody has a story. We really have to take the stigma out of what we think an unsheltered individual actually is. You know, they could be your grandmother, they could be, you know, your family members, you know, there's single families out there living in their vehicle. Statistically, according to the US federal government, 40 to 60% of the individuals currently unhoused or unsheltered are employed. So they're not somebody who doesn't want to work. We just have to remember to start treating people as an individual and start treating them as a human being. Also, what we do in this work is not necessarily a response to crisis, but more of a proactive approach. So we bring what the individual needs to move forward, whatever that looks like to them, whatever that forward momentum looks like to them. You know, it may not be, you know, where we think they should be, you know. And as a member of the community, always remember that this could easily be you at one point in time or another. So when you're approaching somebody, make sure that you're having that conversation with them, rather than asking. If you approach an individual, ask them what they need, not, you know, what's wrong with you. That allows them to guide the conversation, and also allows you to know what the best option is for you. Familiarize yourself with the local resources in the area. You know, your community members sometimes are the first touch point that an individual has before outreach is able to get to them. So being able to know the housing hotline, if they need to get connected to that and they need to start getting connected to housing services, know your local food banks in the area, know, you know, where just local moments are, where can they go to potentially shower, just giving that moment of, hey, here's what I know, and showing that you have genuine concern and not just a brush off approach is going to be more valuable to them than it is going to be just saying, oh, I'm so sorry about what's happening to you. So that would be my biggest suggestion at that point.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. All right, Lance, how about you? What would you like the community to understand the most about the people you provide and the services that you provide?
I think the main thing would be that for the community to know that not everyone out there is a criminal or a drug addict or, you know, has been living outside unsheltered their whole life. You know, along with what Cody said, this is a broad spectrum of people, and also that misconception of all these people want to live outside. You know, I don't think that the majority of them do, and I think that's a common misconception as well. I think people are trying the best that they can to keep their head above water, you know, and I think that they've been let down by society, a lot of people, and it's really sad sometimes to see, you know, trying to be with individuals and help them and listen to them, you know, that a lot of them feel like that the resources are just so limited and that they're banging their head against the wall trying to get out from the situation that they're in. The legal system, you know, doesn't make it easy, you know, from probations to staying on there for, you know, decades at a time for something very simple. And it's just, there's a lot of barriers out there that I don't think the general public really understands. And yeah, that's what I would like for people to know. And as the services that we provide, I think, again, it's that relationship and building that trust with people that have been burnt, really. You know, they've been let down and a lot of broken promises. And I think one of the things that we really try to do best at our agency is when we go and outreach, and if we take it as far as someone wants to enroll in the program, we don't just disappear after that. They're not just a number. You know, this is someone that we want to work with to achieve the goals that they've set in place for themselves, whatever that may be, to better their life the way that they think that it should be, you know, not the way that we think so. We don't force our will or our motives or what we would think housing or recovery would look like that for them. We want to know, and we want the client to drive the bus and just be there alongside with them and, you know, just have that relationship of trust.
Awesome. Thank you. Jackie, how about you?
So I think I would want the public to be kind and be patient. I think I just want to let everyone in the community know that we are out there. There are services, there are We have tons of outreach workers right now, which is so amazing. And we are out there and we are doing the best that we can. I mean, ultimately, we all know that the need far outweighs the resources. And that even if somebody is referred to a housing program, that in and of itself still takes time, sometimes months. And so I would just say to the community, like, be patient, be kind, and we are out there. You have our numbers, and we want to help. So it's great if you all want to help as well, and reach out to us. And I know my team is happy to go out and meet with people as soon as we are able, or let whoever wants to help know the resources and help navigate the systems.
Awesome, Jackie. Thank you. I promise I didn't coach her to say be kind. Mike, how about you?
Most important thing for the community to understand about the people we seek to serve is they're your neighbors. They're us. If you're a part of this community, they too are a part of this community. They are every bit as valuable and every bit as wonderful and every bit as contributory as every other member of where we live. Individuals, so kind of like touching on something Lance said, like, even if they are criminal justice involved, right? Even if they are substance use dependent, even if they do have a significant mental health condition, I cannot tell you how many individuals I have had the pleasure of walking with in a variety of different environments, that when they are squared away, when they are right in themselves, when they feel confident, when they feel supported, when they feel engaged, the incredible things that they bring and give back to this community. There are people on this call, right? Both on the screen and in the visitors that can attest to this, right? The folks that are living unsheltered outside right now, and I apologize for getting a little wound up, I get real passionate about this, right? The folks that are living outside right now, the things that they can give back to us when we give back to them are innumerable. And we are all so much better off, and our community is so much richer and so much more, I don't even know what the word, but it's just so much more tangible. The benefits that having folks that are living outside really feel like they belong in this community, and that we as community members value them, right? It's a win-win situation. Like, we gain just as much as they do. As far as what we offer or what we seek to provide, it's connection and support, right? We are simply another access point to the supportive systems of care that are in existence to help people feel right? To feel engaged, to feel healthy. So there are brick and mortar facilities that are housing supportive services, and that's great. That is absolutely fantastic, and I am all for it. But there are people who, for a variety of reasons, don't feel comfortable or don't feel capable of accessing those services. So why shouldn't we bring them to these folks? Like, why shouldn't we make these services available to them literally where they are at, right? Oftentimes the most in need, the most vulnerable, right? Why shouldn't we be making mental health services available to them in the encampments, in the places that they feel safe, in the places that they are surrounded by the people that support them, right? Why shouldn't we be bringing these services, drug and alcohol services, mental health services, peer support services, right, out to them so that they can find the wherewithal, the support, and the comfort to access more traditional services once they are able to believe in the value and able to believe in the continued support of these services, right? Because so many of them have been burnt so often by these systems. They have been let down so often. They've been paid lip service, right? So going out there and, kind of putting our money where our mouth is and actually delivering on that service where they can, so we can reestablish the trust that we as a community of service providers have lost in a lot of areas, and have lost for a variety of good reasons, right? I've been a part of systems that have not worked. I've seen what that's done, not just to the community at large, but to specific individuals, and seeing the hurt that that's caused and set people back on a path of recovery by 3-4 years, right? So that's what I see is what we bring as a community of service providers is we bring access and we bring the opportunity to enter into these supported systems in brand new ways. And I think it's really valuable, and I hope to see that continue.
Thank you, Mike. All right, Adam, how about you to round us
I have a
round us off?
perspective for sure. And my perspective is, so the question is, what's the most important thing for the community to understand about us? Because I am the people that I serve, and that's a distinction. What I'm going to harken back to the analogy I did earlier about the traumatic incident. What people don't realize is that basically we have a bunch of economic and otherwise put refugees on the streets of Vancouver, and it's a natural disaster. And it's the only time that a natural disaster does not get Red Cross. It does not get emergency housing. It does not get stipends immediately given out to people and all these emergency setup. It's ignored. And then these people that are in a traumatic situation, myself included, we're out there, and then everything that we have to do is done in front of the public. If you have to brush your teeth, you have to do it in a public place. If you have to go to the bathroom, you have to do it in a public place or a public bathroom. Everything you do is under the scrutiny of the public, and the public doesn't understand, and they're basically ignoring a traffic accident. They're basically ignoring a mugging, an assault. They're ignoring victims of crime on the streets and then judging them. And I know that's kind of a harsh way to look at it, but what I want people to remember is that is not the accurate perception of how it is for us. And when, if you can only imagine how it must be like to live and have to do everything or in the public eye, or have to shrink yourself within the public eye in order to make it day by day, and your only focus is survival, your only focus is minute by minute, where will I sleep, where will I eat, who will I be with, will I be safe? Those four things. That's what your life is day in and day out. What's different about the service that we provide is that immediately upon meeting us, you'll know that we bring hope, that that life doesn't have to stay that way, because we were there and now we're not. And we want to lead the way. We want to be, as many times as possible, we want to be first contact. We want to tell people there's a way out. We want to tell people that we understand them and we get them. And the only way we can really do that is by sharing our experience, sharing a part of our story, and giving a little bit of part of ourselves. The magic of peer support is it also keeps us healthy. It also keeps us grounded. It's something that we need. I need the mutuality of the experiences, the beautiful experiences that I have working with people to keep me grounded and keep me healthy and keep me where I need to be and centered. So it's not just a one-way street. There is no power differential. We are equals. We are brothers and sisters and family when we go out there. And all we want to do is just go, this is what we've done. This is how we did it. And that may or may not work for you, but how can I help you do what you want to do? And it's the same message that every agency has said here. And I am really proud to be part of the revolutionary change to Vancouver homeless system. I'm so awesome to watch the growth in Columbia River and CMAR and Council for the Homeless, and this, to be part of that and to be a peer that was also on the streets myself. I'm very proud, and we're going to continue to fight to keep these systems changing and growing as the needs change and grow.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and we'll just wrap up. I know we're coming up on our hour together. So, you know, you heard from our panelists tonight. Everyone has a story. Community members can be a first touch point for people experiencing homelessness, and you can refer them and connect them to street outreach. Not everyone is a criminal or a drug addict. People are out there. They're doing the best we can. Be patient, be kind, and know that people are out there trying to help. people experiencing homelessness are our neighbors, and they give back to us, and they belong and they're valued. And access is opportunity. And outreach workers offer hope, and that mutuality of experience is so valuable for both the helpers and the recipients of that help. So yeah, so thank you. Thank you for being here tonight to seek knowledge. I hope you have a better understanding of some of the key components of street outreach and all that's being done in our community by several different agencies. I appreciate you being here to seek knowledge. Please share it. Engage with elected officials about investments into low income and affordable housing, and about how to create places for people to be, for our neighbors to be, like shelters, like I think I heard the term outposts earlier today, in place of the word encampments, outposts for safety, for security, for shelter. You know, not everyone has housing, and everyone needs to be somewhere. And even those without homes will be somewhere. And we as a community can help to encourage and support safe, humane places for people to be. So I encourage you to think critically about homelessness, and critical thinking feels uncomfortable, and it should challenge, you know, what you thought you knew. If you haven't already, please sign up for our e-newsletter. It keeps you up to date on what's going on with Council for the Homeless. And we also do action alerts for advocacy work. Those will be picking up a lot more as our state legislature goes into the legislative session. And we have some important local advocacy with the Affordable Housing Fund coming up in this next year. So please just stay connected to the Council for the Homeless website. Please share what you learned, the data, the facts, dispel those myths, reduce the stigma of homelessness. And last but definitely not least, thank you, Jackie, be kind. And again, thank you for being here. This is the second part of our two-part webinar. I also want to thank our incredible panel tonight, but as also our panelists that were here in August, who shared their experience being on the receiving end of street outreach. And that was Brooke, Charles, and Lon, who so generously shared their stories. If you missed that one, you can view it on our website. There's the address below. And thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next time. So have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye.